Hey everybody, welcome back to Word Balloon. If you enjoy the videos here, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the Word Balloon YouTube channel, and of course, if you enjoy the audios and the videos, you can subscribe to my Patreon page, patreon.com/wordballoon. Really happy to welcome Marc Siegel from First Second to Word Balloon. First Second has been a favorite choice of mine as far as publishers that do comics beyond what is called the mainstream, but really is just the superhero world, and it's great to get other voices and other storytelling going on. So it's a pleasure to talk to you, man.
Pleasure to talk to you, John. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So, well, let's talk about Five Worlds first. This is your pet project right now.
Yeah, this is one of my babies, and it's a really unusual project because it's five of us working together.
Give us the roster.
Say again?
Give us the roster on Five Worlds.
So I'm writing with my brother Alexis, so Marc and Alexis Siegel, and then we have three young artists, Matt Rockefeller, Xanthi Buma, and Boya Sun. And when we started this project about 6 years ago, they hadn't even graduated from MICA yet, the Maryland College, which is now a force in comics, actually. A lot of good people coming out of there.
Haven't heard this before. That's great, man. Yeah, I didn't know that they were such an active illustration, place. Savannah.
MICA is great. I mean, they've been, it's been a few years that they've had a growing presence in Artist Alley, and like you see, and there's people like Jose Villarrubia is a teacher there. He's done a lot of amazing coloring work.
Oh, yeah.
In mainstream comics, and then Noelle Stevenson, who did Nimona and who's a force in Hollywood now. She comes out of MICA, and just some really, really good talent out of there. But and I don't know if you know Sam Bosma, who did the fantasy sports, beautiful fantasy sports series. He was actually the one who introduced me to those three young artists. And I had started this big project with my brother some years ago, and I was basically planning to draw it myself, and the scope of it just became bigger and bigger and bigger, and as we were digging into the world building and into the background of these five different worlds and this clash of cultures and this big story arc for these characters. Originally, it was going to be it was going to be adult. We actually had it all in adult, and then the project got stuck, and then we let it sit, and we came back to it, and suddenly we recast it with kids and everybody much younger, and suddenly the story opened up. And so then we were looking at this thing, and it was like, I kind of knew the shape it was taking, and it looked like it was going to be, 5 250 page full color graphic novels.
Wow.
So we're talking 1,250 pages of story.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'm either going to be drawing this for the next 20 years or we're going to get a team and do this like studio style. But so what happened is, like, I met these three, I mean, they're kids, they were definitely kids at the time. And it's funny because my real kids, especially my daughter, whenever I call my teammates the kids, she says they're not kids. she doesn't like it, but they're kids. The kids on the team, but they're like uber talented artists, and they each have different strengths. And we started working together, and at first they were a bit like hired guns, just doing, kind of coming on to my project essentially, or our project. And then what happened is we started, when we were bringing in script, they would ask a lot of questions, they would dig in, and very quickly we became partners, So now we have like a very unique collaboration. And I work, as my editorial life, when I'm running First Second, I work with a lot of people. I've seen a lot of teams. And I can tell you, like, this is a rarity, this thing. I'm almost afraid to jinx it. But it's a beauty. It's like five people where ego does not rule the day. And it's like the project is supreme. The project is our kind of joint boss. And it's a beautiful thing. And what happened is, they basically became very invested and very passionate. And so we basically our partnership evolved um, into something quite unexpected. And now, like for example, we have a deal which we only just signed, a Hollywood thing, but when it comes to media rights and stuff, we're splitting everything 5 ways now, and we're
Beautiful. That's awesome, man.
and the way we work is also really unusual because we go basically from a script. I do a thumbnail, and but then you don't see any of my finished work in the pages because then the three of them take it and they break up the scenes between themselves, and they each pencil different scenes. And they go back into each other's scenes and kind of fiddle. And I'm giving notes all this time, all along. And then, and it's really interesting because when you see the pencil level, you actually see three different styles. Even the characters are like slightly different models, and then Matt Rockefeller is the one who does all the line art. So then that kind of unifies the whole thing. And then Xanthi does the key color, and then Boya does a lot of cleanup color, and then we do all the finishing touches. And I'm lettering all along, as we go. And the three of them, what's really awesome is like the way we're working is it's totally not your assembly line comics. It's actually a much more organic, and everybody has a hand in everything. But Matt is kind of like our resident Mobius. He's like the visionary mind. He can make a space that you just feel like, oh my God, this guy had to be there. You believe it, right? It's convincing. Xanthi is all emotion. Like she will get, like when there's this magical kind of dancing, this sand dancing it's called in the story, and she choreographs all that. And she'll go back in sometimes when the emotion is a little off with the acting, and she'll like redo a face or redo a posture, and she's just got this real beautiful sense. And then Boya has this kind of mind of kind of like solving technical issues, and sometimes it's like we have three different technologies in these worlds. Main kind of broadly speaking, there's a dirty old fuel technology, which is kind of like your fossil fuel technology. There's like a new technology where the ships all look like toys and they're really colorful and shiny. And it's a clean technology, but it's also very vulnerable. And then there's like another mysterious organic technology of these living ships. There's only one of those. But anyway, Boya designed all those,
wow.
So then these three talents kind of mesh together really beautifully. Anyway, you can see I'm pretty excited about the whole thing.
I'm thrilled, honestly, man. No, it sounds great. So, from a story standpoint, give us the elevator pitch for Five Worlds.
So the simple rum line is that there are on these five worlds. These five worlds are oddly enough in a quarantine, which wasn't so familiar to everybody until now. But
yeah,
it's a quarantined world that's been basically cut off from the rest of the universe. And there's the backstory of the world goes back thousands and thousands of years to an ancient race of gods that are kind of feline. They're like the felid gods, they're called. And they left behind these 5 beacons, one on each world, and they've been shut off. And they're very mysterious. Nobody exactly knows nowadays in the present what they do, but there's been prophecies and legends and all kinds of stories around them, obviously. And some people believe that it's time to light the beacons in order to save the worlds from this catastrophic overheating that's happening. So some familiar sounding themes, but in the background of it. But we were really, trying to stay true to our universe and not packing in messages. But, we weirdly enough, the main villain in the story, we really did try and focus our minds on the nature of evil, and that villain has more and more resonance with our times in ways that has been picked up in some of the reviews. In France, the French version, the press went really crazy with like the parallels with today and stuff, which was great. It's great. It's doing really well in France right now.
Well, the best science fiction reflects our times,
It's a
and
mirror. I agree. I agree. That to me, science fiction, mostly the best science fiction is not really about the future, right? And I feel like some of the best stuff is this project has escaped us, so it has a life of its own. And so we're right now wrapping up book 5,
wow.
and yeah, we're finishing the cycle. And well, script wise, the art team is about 50 pages into the last book now, and I'm so proud of it. But I also feel like, wow, it's beyond my hopes. So anyway, so the short elevator pitch is these 5 ancient beacons. There's one very clumsy, unlikely sand dancer called Una Lee, and she is basically setting out on this quest. She's kind of thrust into this quest to light the 5 beacons and try and save the worlds. So that's the overall story. And then within that, each world presents unique obstacles. Like in some cases, in the next one, actually the one that's coming up in a couple of weeks on May 12th, book 4 is called The Amber Anthem. They arrive and find the beacon, and it's encased in a thick layer of amber. And it's a mystery, and they're going to have to solve this mystery of, like, how do you actually get to the beacon to light it? In book 3, the world we were on was Munyata, it's called. There's like these 5 different worlds have their own culture, their own geology, atmosphere, unique look, fashions, and culture. Book 3 was Munyata, which is the superpower, and it's the most industrial. And they arrived to find the beacon completely encased in like pipes and pipelines, and basically it's being exploited, and the power of this beacon is being drained off to support this society. And they don't know how to even get at it again, so each time there's basically her and her friends are confronted with an impossibility. And then in the course of the story, I mean, this is much more than an elevator pitch, but
no, it's all good. Honestly, we're hanging on every word. Please
We're
continue.
getting walked out of the elevator at this point.
No, that's fine. The elevator got stuck. We're all in the elevator, and that's fine. And thankfully, it's air conditioned, so we're comfortable. It's all right.
There's a pandemic. Stuck in the elevator.
Yeah, but I was going to say we're keeping our distance, our social distancing in the elevator. It's a big enough elevator. So no, this all sounds great. Continue.
So the other thing that's happening is, we're the characters themselves have secrets. Each of the 3 major characters have unexpected secrets, and they're going through, from book to book, they're going through massive transformations, including in their appearance. Una Lee transforms, like her appearance changes from the book to book, and then the worlds themselves are transforming. And it's culminating in book 5 in a very, very big transformation. So that's a big it's a big thing to run at, and that's why like we're a team.
Well, I get it, and again, every volume 250 pages. Is that still?
Yes. Yeah. And we're delivering one a year, so they come out every May.
Okay, yeah.
So to keep that pace, basically on my own, that would never happen.
Tell me, well, and again, because right now the direct market is obviously on pause, and I mean they are saying that Diamond is trying to obviously kind of get things going either in mid-May or the end of May. So but I know a lot of other publishers beyond use distribution beyond Diamond. Yes. So what is tell me about First Second's distribution.
Yeah, I mean, First Second is part of Macmillan. And Macmillan is one of the big 5 for now. They'll probably eventually be the big 3.
God, isn't that amazing and sad?
Yeah, I mean, last year we were part of the big 6.
Wow.
And then, last year, whenever Penguin and Random House merged,
yes,
in the big 5. So we have, First Second is in this really interesting situation where we have, so there's the direct market, there's the trade market, and then there's what we call institutional, which is school and library. And First Second has been almost evenly split between those 3.
Okay.
market. And so we are now in a situation of trying to support all of them, trying to support the indie bookstores, trying to support the comic shops, and looking for ways, how do we, navigate through these times together and keep them from going under. And the libraries haven't reopened, but that's a really important part. Some of the big awards that we've won have been librarian awards. So that there's a lot of big question marks. We're for sure. I think the consensus at the top of Macmillan seems to be that in 12 months' time, we're in a new reality. There's a new normal, and we don't know what that is yet.
Yes.
It's actually a big world transformation and not just like a blip. Right? I mean, obviously.
No, I hear you, man. No, and in fact, I was looking forward to the ALA conference, which
Yeah.
was going to be in Chicago this summer,
Yeah,
and
that's right.
I likely would have run into you at that show. And
Yes.
I love how beyond Scholastic and that program, how the libraries have really
Totally.
stepped up and been a great advocate of comics of all types. And it really they get it. And that
Yes.
was the great vibe years ago when I went to my first ALA Chicago show. I've only gone to the ones here in the city and everything where I live, but there it really was. It was terrific,
It is.
and their genuine excitement for
Yeah.
the comic
No,
product.
there's some really passionate advocates, and it's like, and I would say among the librarians, the most influential have been the teen librarians, and they're the ones they're actually tapped into their local communities. They have like teen advisory committees, and they're passionate themselves. It's not they're the ones who've been giving the awards, at like the Prince Award. In some cases, we had like this one summer by the Tamaki cousins. That was the first book ever nominated for a Caldecott and a Prince. No,
Wow.
no book had ever been on both those lists.
Wow.
American Born Chinese was our first. That was in our first year with First Second in 2006.
Is that Gene's book, Gene Yang?
Yeah, Gene Yang's first book, with a big publishing house.
Yeah.
And he, yeah, I mean, that was a game changer for American publishing. That like all the big six at the time sat up and took notice, and they were like, and that was the doing of the teen librarians. Like and when you get like that gold sticker from the Prince Award, and he also happened to get a National Book Award nomination and a ton of other things. But that gold sticker means 80,000 librarians are ordering that book every couple of years forever. So that was kind of like in our first year, some of the stuff that I was kind of thinking, I had a goal with First Second that we would get comics into the literary landscape in America, into the literary conversation, like into the mainstream reading diet, like of America. And that kind of thing, because I grew up in France and I saw in the 70s and 80s, basically comics authors were alongside major literary authors, and schools started adopting comics in their textbooks, and it was basically, there was no barrier of entry. There was no stigma about comics being bad for you or not being real books or any of that crap. And so what happened, I thought, okay, we're going to make this kind of leap in America, and the time is right. And I figured it would take us 10 years. And it basically happened in our first year.
That's amazing.
And
That's
a lot of that,
fantastic,
a lot of that's to Gene Yang. And now he's got his new one coming out, Dragon Hoops, which is huge. And it's like, and now, it's like, what is it, 12 or 13, 14 years later. And he's been, National Ambassador of Children's Literature. He won the MacArthur Genius Grant.
Yes, indeed.
He wrote Superman,
Yes.
He wrote the Avatar Last Airbender comics for Dark Horse. He's got his new Superman, actually. Superman Smashes the Klan is just about to come out.
An incredible story. I love the backstory of the radio show that it's based on,
Yes,
and
yes,
yeah, it's
yes.
really this beautiful,
It
very
is.
positive story
Yeah, no,
beyond
Gene
the
is
Superman versus the Klan element of the surface story. Yes,
yes. I mean, the fact he went and dug that up, and then it turns out the radio play used, the victim of the story at the start of the story is a Chinese family because at the time, they thought if they used a black family, it would be too politically sensitive. So it's weird, right? I mean, and so there
absolutely.
he is. It's really, it's kind of incredible. But Gene, I feel like Gene is a man with a destiny. And I feel like, first, second, it's like our privilege, it's our honor that, we get to work with him and with some other really, I think, world-class people, that we publish.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'll obligate you and say I hope to have a conversation with Gene about Dragon Hoops and really what he's been doing. So I hope we can make that
After
happen in the future.
after this, I'll follow up with you on that for
That
sure.
would be lovely. But honestly, the history of your publication, yeah, tell us about some of your other stars from First Second that you've really focused on. And well, I want to ask you one thing before we get too far down the line, because I probably always say it wrong. The Franco-Belgian comic book. I was saying Bede or
Yeah.
Bidet, and I know Bidet is, of course, the thing in the
And
bathroom.
not
But yeah,
BD.
so is it Bede?
BD, yeah, BD. I mean, in French, you say that BD is bande dessinée. It's just the letters B and D, but BD, yeah, yeah.
Okay, because I had heard it, and I probably heard it with someone that had a real whatever region of an accent that I first heard it. And yeah, like I said, I was saying bidet, and I'm like,
Yeah.
no, it's not
No,
like bidet, it's bid, So yeah, I'm
yeah,
glad.
no, you're right. You got it right. You got it right. I think that's pretty good.
So,
Yeah.
and again, because I was going to ask you what was your inspiration to do First Second, and it doesn't surprise me because as I've gotten older, I'm in my 50s now. I still love a great superhero story,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I was like, I still love the format of comics, and was lucky enough to be at smart direct market stores that had this great European and South American product, global product. I mean,
Totally.
manga is its own thing as well, obviously.
And manga, I mean, what's fascinating is that now we're in a time when like those three, I mean, like the Americas, there's like Western Europe, and then there's Asia, which for a long time was really Japan, but now it's really kind of a few different places. But those three great schools have been merging and cross-pollinating and you can take someone, if you take like a Paul Pope, you can see the American school. There's Kirby there, but then there's Mobius and there's Hergé, and then there's
Yes,
Kurosawa and Tezuka. It's like,
sure,
and the pacing of manga and stuff like that. They're
cross
blending.
pollinating. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I feel like I mean, what's really cool is like, so First Second, when I launched into First Second, it was 2005 or so.
Okay.
And I had been a designer at Simon and Schuster designing picture books. And
Oh wow.
before that, I was basically I came to the States for college. And then after that was done, I moved to Boston with my wife. And for about 12 years, I collected rejection letters for my projects. And I was submitting to like all the big publishers for picture books in America
Okay.
and comics projects with
When
the
you
Euro.
say picture books, were they coffee table books? Were they young people picture books? What were they?
Oh, that I was designing at Simon and
Yeah,
Schuster.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, children's picture books.
Okay, I'm with you now. Okay, yeah,
So,
sure.
and I was working with some really great talent in that space. And it was interesting because this was right when manga was peaking in America. And back then there were still Borders, and
Yes,
Borders every few months they were like adding a new bay just to kind of carry more manga. And
yes.
a lot of people were very nervous about this, and a lot of people also just didn't understand it and were going like, what do we do with this stuff? Like, how do you even read it? And like all that, a lot of people, there was a lot of conversation about like, is this a disaster? Is this like a catastrophe happening for publishing? But what was fascinating is like two things happened, and I would say manga made First Second possible.
Interesting.
Two things happened in America that I saw at the time. One was manga, first of all, at the time, still now it's a big force, but there were millions of dollars changing hands, and the big six publishers weren't getting a piece of that. They were watching this going on, and they're going like, wait a minute, we're just like on the sidelines here, and there's some people we've never even heard of that are making millions and upon millions. And they struggled, some of them, I remember being at meetings in one house where it was like they didn't even know how to pronounce it, but they were like, what do we do? Do we make mangas of our own kind of thing? It's like, and so that was one thing, is like basically the big publishers sat up and took notice in a way that was like, before that, it was like, well, DC and Marvel have it sewn up. They're doing their thing. We're not going to come up with a new superhero.
Right.
So we're not playing that game. Then it was like there was Persepolis, there had been Mouse, there had been Watchmen, there had been these moments,
Sure.
but then not necessarily this follow-up.
Would you say Craig Thompson and Blankets did that
Yeah,
knock down a couple doors?
one of those big moments. And now, I mean, if that had come out, 10 years later, it probably would have been an award winner, likely.
Yeah.
But so, and I think so that was one thing, was like the business of publishing was on notice.
Yeah.
And the other thing was the flip for comics in America, the gender balance, going from like 85% male readers to suddenly 65% female readers. And then out of that, a lot of the people I publish, like if you look at people like Faith Hicks or Vera Brosgol or Jen Wang, or like these amazing people doing comics today.
Yes. Renee Telgemeier, obviously.
Yeah. And they didn't grow up necessarily reading Wolverine, they're like, or Hulk, they're like, some did, but many of them were like Sailor Moon and Fruit Baskets and stuff like that, and some of the European stuff.
Yes.
So it's like these different currents were suddenly flooding into American comics. And I feel like that, without that, it would not have been possible to build for a second. So it was right at that moment. I was just getting my first break as an illustrator in picture books, and my first picture book was called Sea Dogs, and I illustrated. It was really fun. It was this kind of it was like a Gilbert and Sullivan operetta in a dog world.
Hilarious.
And it was a legendary editor who started like Judy Blume and Chris Rushka and some really good.
Wow. Yeah. Jesus.
And he was going to retire soon, and I was one of his last, on-board artists. He took me, and he gave me my first break. And so I did Sea Dogs. It won the Texas Bluebonnet, and it got noticed. And it was this European-looking comic. So that was interesting. At the same time, I was still at Simon & Schuster. I started dipping into editorial, and I acquired Little Vampire Goes to School by Joan Spar.
Okay.
A classic in France. And
very cool.
And that popped onto the New York Times bestseller list. And this was all happening like right at that moment in around 2004, where like all the houses are looking around going like, what do we do about this? And some people are going like, okay, we do fake manga of our own.
Right. I remember.
Import real manga, but that's already been taken. We try, and it was kind of guesswork.
Sure.
And I had this, like, for me, I had made this little paper with a vision for like a literary graphic novel house, but done like for North America, because Canada and the US there's no border in comics, obviously.
I'm with you. Yeah.
So I was basically going down this road. At Simon & Schuster, I couldn't really get answers to my email because I was a nobody sitting in a cubicle. But weirdly, I started meeting CEOs from other houses.
Wow.
And they were, it was on their minds. They were like, what do we do about this comics thing?
What is this thing, and how do we get into it, and how do we get our piece of the pie? Yeah.
It's a little bit like, you hear these stories of in Buckingham Palace, they would meet like to discuss the Beatles, and they were like, what do we do? Do we shut them down or do we knight them? apparently that was going on. It's like, how do we control it, or do
Yeah,
we
how do
kind
we
of,
handle this?
yeah,
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 because they don't get it. Mark, I see the same thing in broadcasting with
yeah,
the online media that has happened, and I this is a and it's and so it is reassuring to hear this from the book standpoint because yeah, from the broadcasting standpoint, I mean, I've been in major market broadcasting for 30 years, and yeah, man, when podcasting and video casting were happening, what is this thing? How do we get involved? I
yeah,
don't understand it, and it's great to. I mean, my friend Julianne Emery, who's a wonderful actress, she's on Bosch right now on
oh,
Amazon Prime. She
yeah.
created her own online TV show and got great actors in New York to do it. How did you shoot that? On my phone. Where did you shoot it? In my apartment. What made it? Well, how'd you edit it? I
Yeah,
learned how to edit, and
yeah,
it's great because again, it's people that it's us self starters. And while the bigwigs are scratching their heads, how do you do that? It's like, okay, great. You keep running in the maze and banging your head against the wall. We're gonna make our own stuff, and
yeah.
I congratulate you for doing that with First Second.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's exactly, I mean, what you're talking about, I think, is like, it's exactly that. And it's a good example because what you're talking about is when something is fresh and when it connects, then it's like water. It slips through all the pre-existing, systems. And comics has always been that in a way. It's always been, a little under the radar. I mean, now it's less under the radar, but it still has that freedom, and it has and it's also doesn't have the, like, Hollywood, is still pretty burdened, especially in feature Hollywood. They're burdened with, when you have like $100 million budget, you have too many cooks in that kitchen, and art loses out. There's just not the freedom to take risks in the same way. Um, and I think with the comics you do, So I was in this really interesting moment where it was just like, I don't know how to describe it other than just a magical confluence of timings. One piece of all this was every week in Publishers Weekly, there was Calvin Reed and Heidi McDonald putting pieces about, it was this steady drumbeat of, like, especially the numbers in manga. But it was also about, like, the resurgence of the comics medium,
Yes.
and the durability of it and all this. And I had, so this little vision, 3 pages for a literary graphic novel house. And when I would meet with some of these CEOs, way above my pay grade, they would be, mostly the conversation was like, well, we could try, like, if I had like a list of 20 things, they'd be like, well, we could try that the first year and maybe do a couple of those in the second year. And I was like, oh, that's doomed. Like, and I remember one meeting where I said something like, it's not going to work if you do it with an eyedropper. You have to go in there with a fire hose. That's the only way. You go with like a 5-year plan,
Yeah.
build a collection in all 3 age categories. Most American publishers don't do all 3. They don't do adult and teen and children's. Like, American publishing is not really set up that way because they're like different games and different reviewers and different channels and everything.
Certainly.
So they were like, no, but maybe we could try a couple titles the first year. And I was like, okay, I don't think I want to play, And then I meet John Sargent.
Okay.
And it was a weird set of coincidences. We met at a wedding, of all things. And he is the head of all Macmillan Global now. Really interesting dude. He's a real dude. He's not a suit. This guy is like, he's real. And the way
He gets it.
recently we did he had a State of the Union virtually with all Macmillan, and he was like really ethical. He basically was announcing exactly, like, he's not taking a salary for the next 3 months.
Wow.
Everybody in upper management is getting a big pay cut. All the younger junior salaries are protected.
That's great.
He was basically going down this list of, like, what an ethical, humane company does.
That's great to hear in this. Yeah.
He's a good guy. He's like, and this is not me, like, kissing anybody's ass. It's like I really believe that. But I met this guy, and he took a look at my vision, these 3 pages, and he's kind of quiet, and he's just reading through it. And then he looks up and he goes, "Okay,
Wow.
give it a go."
Wow.
And then a week later, he set me up with like two heads of different imprints for like a 7 a.m. breakfast outside Grand Central Station.
Okay.
And they offer me an imprint
Wow.
of my own.
Yeah.
And I never made a resume for that. I never gave anybody a resume, you know, like I just
the pitch, just a 3-page
thing,
pitch.
it's also like Macmillan. It tells you something about Macmillan.
Wow.
And also the fact that Macmillan is not a corporation. You know, it's actually privately owned. It's a family of German philanthropists, you know, the Holtzbrink family.
Wow.
And that's very interesting because I was basically, I can guarantee you that if I had been at any other house starting for second, I would have been axed by year 3.
Wow.
And Macmillan, they're actually, they never threatened to pull the plug on me. And like right from our first year, we started getting the prestige. We were collecting more starred reviews than any other imprint. It was just the prestige that we had happened very quickly, but we were not profitable for over 5 years, and they backed us.
They believed in you. They believed in what you were doing.
They stuck it out, and then now they're really proud because we paid off. Like we really rounded a corner, especially in like 2013. We suddenly went onto a curve, you know, from being flat for a few years, and we've been on this crazy upward trajectory. I mean, now who knows what's going to happen in the coming year, but we're still moving a lot of books right now.
That's amazing. Like, how much of your product is imported, and how much of it is any of it imported?
Some is. We publish some really good people from all over the place. Obviously, I have my soft spot for the Frenchies. You know, I've got a few of those. But when I started the list, the balance was like a lot of imports and translations. Now I would say, you know, we do about 50 books a year, and there might be like 4 or 5 translations.
Okay, sure.
So it's mostly all homegrown, you know, and now we've now had like major hits in every age category. You know, at first it was hard because all our hits were happening in teen.
Okay, sure.
And I was kind of like, I was getting a little bit of, you know, some of my bosses at the time were like, well, maybe just focus on that. It's working. And I'm like, no. We got to hang in there. We need that adult list. We need the children's, like the really young stuff is preparing the adult readers of tomorrow, you know?
Absolutely.
So we need it all.
Absolutely.
We need it all. And now we have like, I mean, in the adult stuff, we have this mega runaway hit with the Adventure Zone, which is this podcast. You know, originally it's from a podcast.
Hey, crazy. Awesome.
And that's a really,
so it's
really
a narrative. It's a narrative storytelling. Like, you know, it's an audio drama that became a graphic novel.
Yeah. It's these. So the McElroys they're out in West Virginia, and it's these grown men playing D&D with their dad, and they've become. I mean, it's a huge fan base.
That's lovely.
Really loyal. And the person doing the art is Carrie Peach, and she's been a cartoonist for a long time, but she was doing fan art for the Adventure Zone.
Hilarious.
And these guys, it was so funny because we didn't know it was going to be such a hit for us, but we had the first book of the Adventure Zone is so basically you're in a fantasy, and then every so often it goes meta, and you pop out, and there's the dungeon master is kind of commenting on the action, and then you're back into it. It's actually really good writing and good art. But we had when we did the first book, we were like a year before publication, we had the McElroys at San Diego.
Okay.
And we were like, what do? We don't have anything for them to sign, so we just basically printed a postcard for them to sign. And we kind of thought we were doing them a little favor. And they decided to do a live cast in the gas lamp at that theater. What's it called?
Is it where the library is, or no? I know what you're talking about.
Big movie theater where they played Scott Pilgrim and stuff. And
yes, I know what you're talking about.
They booked that, And
Wow.
in 5 minutes, they sold 1,500 tickets. Then when
Outstanding.
they were at our booth, the mob that came down upon us, basically San Diego security had to come and manage that mob around and keep it moving. And there was like cosplay that, there's like this mushroom lady with these lights under her hat. You're like, who are these characters? And they're like this intense fan base. And this was like 1 year before publishing. We had 40,000 pre-orders on Amazon.
Wow. Outstanding, Mark. That's fantastic.
And that's like, so we've got the adult stuff. We have some mega hits now in children's. We have Real Friends by Shannon Hale and Luen Pham.
Okay.
Real Friends, now the sequel, Best Friends, which is definitely past 1 million copies. And we're and they're kind of in the space that Raina Telgemeier opened up with Smile, and the kind of that middle grade memoir is like, that's the hottest category right now in kind of that publishing. So yeah, it's been like the last 15 years have been quite, we've been watching this landscape just completely transforming around us. And now what's really cool is, a couple of my teammates, first, second teammates, went to Comics Pro, and they were, set upon. And many, many of these comics retailers, they were basically ready. They were looking for new models, for new distribution, and they were really, really, really eager for this younger middle grade graphic novel. Now you can see DC is actually like focusing on that as well.
Absolutely, they are 100% there. Well, and it's so funny. Literally, before we were talking, I was speaking to Jeff Johns, and he made that direct market observation as well, that coming out of the virus and the interior of the stores are going to change because of this new product that companies like yourself are providing, and that's where the first readers of comics are coming from.
Absolutely.
Cater to them. Yes, indeed, and build a comic reader that way.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it seems so obvious, but it's a bit like what you were talking about before. It's like, when certain things are set in their ways and they have a history of great success, but it's like the recipe for that success is no longer going to work.
The market has changed. No, God, and I know you're aware of it too. Growing up when we did, the way Napster changed the music business.
Right.
And again, these are companies, corporations, mega corporations that for decades were doing it the same way. Yeah. And what do you mean we have to change? Well, we're still making money. And then all of a sudden they weren't making money anymore. And it is really, as a broadcaster, it's been fascinating watching how all these facets of media have changed because of the customers and what they want to read, and again, that new ideas continue to happen. You would think there are no new ideas left, but again, because
I'm not. I don't believe. I don't subscribe to that at all. Like, nothing new under the sun. I don't believe that.
Clearly,
I feel like there's new kind of coming in, and there's people who capture it. People catch it and express it, and it's like that has a life that's very attractive to many, many people. And I feel like one of the places, like you mentioned, the podcast and the streaming and I think comics is one of the places where there's that life, there's that glow, and I mean, now we're placing a lot of stuff with Hollywood. I have my own projects are, in development and in various things. And there's a good reason that, film and TV is really focusing on comics,
Well, again, it was an untapped storytelling medium that were telling great stories, and thankfully now a lot of the executives grew up on the format of comic books.
Yes,
and it's again that former idea that comic books, well, it's superheroes, and again, thankfully globally it wasn't the case, and in fact, usually superheroes don't work in these other markets, and it is these great love stories, spy stories, crime stories. And again, I mean,
are in nonfiction. I mean, we're having
this
thing, an explosion. One of the things that's doing very, very well for First Second is a whole line of nonfiction comics. We have a line called Science Comics, and we have like some very strong science and some really strong cartooning.
Wow.
come together, you know, and we started out with 4 books. It was like coral reefs and volcanoes and flying machines and bats.
Ha!
Those were the first 4. And before they even came out, the pre-orders went through the roof. And we set out like basically a little satellite publishing unit. You know, it's Dave Roman actually, who's a longtime comics and animation guy and an author himself. He's actually running it for us. But we, you know, we still do. We're involved, and I was very involved in setting up the template for it. But we have this. It's a cottage industry. There's about 25 titles now,
Wow.
and each one is like one subject, and there's a kind of a story framework, but then it's packed with science, and we're getting so each one is a hook into a different domain of science. So you get like coral reefs gets you into climate change, dogs gets you into DNA,
Okay.
you know, rockets gets you into gravity, you know, and it's awesome. It's awesome, and that stuff is it's being picked up in schools, and it's meant for middle grade, but we're hearing from like high school teachers using them. You know, so then we've in a similar vein, we've launched history comics, and we're also launching this maker comics, which is instructional comics for like baking or repairing a car or gardening or robotics. You know, it's really, really cool stuff.
Well, you're building on what Will Eisner did, after he left comics, but then he went and created PS Magazine for the military because their dry instructional manuals, soldiers didn't care. They weren't reading them. And it's like, well, how about presenting them in an entertaining way? It totally revolutionized how the military taught their people to assemble and operate machinery and the like. And yeah, no, I'm not surprised. And again, taking a page from manga, because I know there have been cooking manga and other and sport manga and everything.
And totally.
Yeah, no, that's seriously, Mark, that's fantastic, and it's great to hear this and really get into the DNA of a publisher like yourself in terms of the kind of product that you're putting out, and just expanding the medium and showing truly. It's comic books are, and I know we're preaching to the choir and including the Word Balloon audience right now, but that it really is this great medium that can literally do anything on a shoestring budget. I mean, really, as Jack Kirby once said, just give me a piece of paper and a pencil and I'll create a universe.
Yes, totally.
Yeah, man, that's amazing. Seriously, Mark, that's fantastic. Are there other books beyond Five Worlds that you want to promote as far as what's coming up?
I mean, there's so much going on. I feel like and I'm just so lucky for the people I work with are, there's some incredible talent. I think, one thing I'd like to mention is this. So in the nonfiction line, we're just now launching a new line called World Citizen Comics.
Okay.
And it was featured in, we had a big feature in Entertainment Weekly, and then we had another one in Forbes.
Wow.
And that is a line of civics comics. And this is going to be like, I mean, you've never seen this before. And it's kind of it's like basically we're building a bookshelf that is going to be like a foundation of civics. And a lot of it, some of the first books are focused on kind of American stuff, but it also has a global reach. And so we have books on the Constitution. We have Dan Rather's book, What Unites Us, which is Reflections on Patriotism.
Wow.
Into a graphic novel.
Holy cow.
We have the first book is Unrig. The art is by George O'Connor, who did the Olympians. And these are, Unrig is basically understanding like how to fix our broken democracy.
Wow.
Understanding the mechanisms of it. But then there's some books that are coming that are on media literacy and understanding persuasion. How do we get persuaded? And that's so important. We're doing a young one and an older one.
That's great.
I have a book with I don't know if you know the podcast Gaslit Nation, but these
No, tell me.
basically specialists, these two women are specialists of authoritarian regimes. And,
Wow.
and it's an incredible book. I just signed this up recently. It's called Dictatorship. It's Easier Than You Think. And it's like a how-to guide for an aspiring dictator. But what it does is like it actually unpacks the authoritarian playbook in like this brilliant way, you know. And some of the people that are doing the artwork on these things are some of the cartoonists from the Nib. Like Kasia Babis is one. She's this Polish cartoonist who's amazing, amazing. And there's more. I mean, there's some really, really, really cool stuff coming about disinformation and propaganda, but also about different aspects of the Constitution. You know, there's the Free Speech Handbook coming, which is all about the First Amendment.
Cool.
I mean, really, really cool stuff. And that stuff, I have like a small army of librarians, you know, who are, you know, just itching to just take this out and champion it. You know? But that
schools,
World Citizen Comics is one to look out for. I think that I kind of wish I could have published this stuff like 5 years ago, but you know, it might be serving to kind of rebuild our society. You know.
understood. No, I think again because of what's happening right now, that's great to hear. Are schools, along with libraries, receptive to this line?
Absolutely. And we have, I mean, what's interesting is I should say, there's people, I mean, among the authors I publish, you know, there's people from all different political stripes. And same thing in the World Citizen Comics. I actually, right now, we're just about to sign with some really interesting people on the right that are like the old-fashioned conservative, you know.
I'm with you.
You know. And
yes.
And so we're not trying to have people kind of neutralize their point of view, but they own it. You know, they kind of own it, put it there up front. But we have like a real wide spectrum of views. So it's not actually, it's certainly not partisan, you know, and it's very much in the spirit of the Dan Rather book, which is really beyond partisanship, you know, and the fundamental is, do you believe in democracy? Do you believe in rule of law? Do you believe in accountability for your government? If so, then these books will. It's interesting because actually, not in this line, right? As a standalone book, we did this really interesting adult nonfiction book called Open Borders. And the writer, I think the writer and the artist have different views about things, but the writer is this brilliant, very knowledgeable researcher about immigration, right? And Open Borders was like one of those few books that it pissed off the left and it pissed off the right, but universally the reviewers said, this book is so well researched that if you want to know about immigration, whatever your views may be, read this book and you'll come out of it like truly informed.
Interesting.
You know, and it's a great book. Open Borders is an amazing book.
That's excellent, man. Honestly, again, well, you know, and really for a democracy to work, you have to be receptive to ideas beyond your sphere. Yeah. And that's the only way, consensus. And that's my one frustration with the current political way. It's win at all costs. No, compromise is losing. And that message just infuriates me. And, you know, I'll admit I'm a liberal, but also I have great old-fashioned conservative friends. Please tell me where I'm getting it wrong or I'm not seeing your side of the story. Right. Because the only way we're going to move forward is if we understand each other. And again, a solution might be in the middle. And I think that's terrific to hear. And again, that comic books are exploring these higher ideas.
It's comics. I mean, that's the thing is, you know, the people, like we have Seth Abramson and we have some amazing people are writing some of these World Citizen comics. He's actually working with Scott McCloud on this. It's going to be called The Citizen Journalist. It's about his curatorial journalism. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, man, that's a hell of a team. Absolutely. Good Lord.
Yeah. And he's like, he worships Scott McCloud. Like Seth Abramson is a fan of his, you know, he's like, but what's interesting is, you know, these people that you wouldn't expect are, you know, they see comics, I mean, they saw what happened with Congressman Lewis in March, you know, and how
I was going to
he
bring that
was
up. Absolutely.
he was embraced at Comic-Con, you know, and he, you know, that tells you something, you know, it tells you something. And I think, you know, comics, I mean, going back to Superman, you know, it's like that is a powerful imagery. You know, it's a powerful imagery. I mean, Superman was a response to the Ubermensch, you know, and the whole thing. That's not an accident. You know, I think it's a
Well,
medium
it's
for its time.
yeah, and social injustice, and I mean, God, those you go back to those original 10 or so issues of Action Comics, and
Yes.
Superman is cleaning up slums and going after political fat cats and corruption,
Yes.
and those are the evils that he, and of course that great, and I know you are aware of it as well. How would Superman, you know, win the war and take care of the dictators like Mussolini and Hitler and everything, and bringing them to the League of Nations, the precursor to the failure of the 30s of the United Nations, or before the United Nations happened. No, it's you're right, and again, social responsibility was as important as flying and punching a bad guy in the face.
No, that's totally right. And, you know, I think there's this idea, I think it was RFK Jr. maybe, who said that Americans are the most entertained and the least informed of people. And I feel like we need to push against that. And I feel like comics, you know, um, sometimes there's this the focus has been so much on entertainment, but I do feel that comics can be a force that can lift people up, you know, and provide like new insight or, you know, empower in some way. So I'm very interested in that. And I mean, I can't wait. I do wish there's an urgency with these World Citizen comics where I keep hoping like it's not too little too late, but I feel like these books, many of these books could be around for a long, long time.
And when do they start coming out?
So Unrig is coming out in a month. I think that's the first one. The
Wow.
first four are coming out this year. So by the end of the year, and you know, right now we're dealing. It's been interesting because we already lost a lot of our printing in China because it turned out, you know, we couldn't print anything that had a map in it in China. The
Oh,
censors would not allow
wow.
maps.
Wow.
I think we had an issue. Did we have an issue with Dragon Hoops? I know there's a number of books that we ended up publishing in Italy and in Singapore and in Malaysia. And with World Citizen Comics, you know, forget it. It was basically, it's all about democracy. And we actually sent in like an early proof to get tested, and it came back. It's like, okay, there's nowhere in China that will be allowed to print this for you.
Fascinating. Wow.
So we're not printing there. And I think there's one of the ones that's coming out, the Fault Lines in the Constitution is coming out in the fall, and we're scrambling to shift the production right now, partly because
Jesus.
of the pandemic. But
With Rather's book, how was, and that it'd be interesting to hear, you know, an old classic broadcaster like Dan,
he's
you know, obviously he's willing to adapt it, but yeah, what was it an easy negotiation?
it was surprisingly easy. I mean, I read that book, What Unites Us, and I thought this was so. It's just like a noble-hearted, you know, high-minded in the best sense. Like it's just like a love of democracy, and it really doesn't live in the dichotomy, you know, the low-level civil war that's been going on in America. And
Yeah.
and it's just like, you know, and he has like a chapter on the difference between patriotism and nationalism, you know, and it's so simple, but it's so missing in the basic education of us all, you know, like just
Yes.
what's great is like we basically I went to him and I said, if we could take your like each chapter starts with an anecdote, you know, so he talks about growing up in Texas in the Great Depression, you know, and living with his family, going in these road trips. Then he talks about covering MLK or covering Vietnam, and each one of those little anecdotes is then a springboard for a bigger meditation about democracy. So I basically said to him, if we can get you access to your family album for your photo albums, and you can kind of help guide the artist here. And we got Tim Foley, who's a really interesting artist for this. He has like he has a style that's a little bit like some of the Mad Magazine, like more Drucker type.
Funny. Sure.
But he has it's a kind of a retro vibe that fits with Dan Rather just right.
Understood.
And he went and did it, and it's exactly that. Like you feel like it brings alive like what it looked like in the Great Depression in Texas. You know, it's awesome. It's like I can't wait to share that with you. I mean, you'll have to see.
No, it'd be my pleasure. Truly, I would like to see it. Man, I'm going to make a suggestion. I don't know if you've had any contact with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but I got to talk to him about. I mean, our main topic was writing Mycroft Holmes stories and his love of comics. But really, I've loved what he's been doing in the Hollywood Reporter, his essays. Yeah. And I told him, I said, thank you. Again, most of it was about just fun nerd stuff because and it's wonderful that one of the greatest basketball players of all time is one of us and is a nerd. Yeah, but awesome. I'm like, thank you for being out there and being vocal, comparing the culture wars that you suffered through the 60s and 70s to comparing it to what's going on today. Because we need that kind of perspective, and obviously Rather is another guy, and that's wonderful that he's doing it. So maybe there's something in his essays that you might want to explore for a future First Second.
He's done he's done some comic stuff right.
Still reading heavy metal, which cracks me up, and has great opinions about the alien and evolution of what they've done in the movies, and he was fantastic, classic nerd, and it was great. His people were just like, "Hey, we're not trying to like dictate the interview, but can you just tell us some subjects?" I'm like, "I want to know where he bought his comics. I want to know what he read. I want to know how long he's been reading." And I go, and also I know he's a big jazz fan. I really want to talk to him about his love of jazz. And they wrote back, and it was so gratified. They're like, "This is great. He's going to love this." And we had this wonderful half-hour conversation. And really, because I come from sports radio, and he's kind of tired of talking basketball.
Yeah.
So it really was like, and even my friends who are broadcasters and have interviewed him a million times, it's like, hey, hit him with some stuff that he doesn't normally get. And people are like, how come he didn't talk about Airplane? How come he didn't talk about him with Bruce Lee? I'm like, he's done those conversations. I want a unique Kareem Abdul-Jabbar conversation. And truly, while we were doing this, like I said, he was writing these incredible essays at the Hollywood Reporter. He is such a brilliant man. Yeah. And it was such an honor to speak with him. And again, I feel the same way, especially as an old broadcaster myself. I mean, I have tremendous respect for Rather, and I think he does have big ideas. And I'm glad that post CBS he's able to really be out there and go beyond what they would allow him to talk about in a network capacity. So.
Yeah, definitely. And I've heard, the people, I didn't get to see him on his book tour, but when he was touring with that book, I heard from people from around the country who went to listen to him, and they said it was luminous, it was uplifting, it was profound, it was, it left you, like it just put you into a place of hope and belief in, the higher ideals of America, great.
Well, again, the people you're working with, from Gene and Seth and McLeod and Rather and stuff, no, it's great, man, and I'm glad that First Second is out there and is as vital and thriving as it can be in these times right now. And I'm glad Macmillan is backing you up and gets what you're trying to do with this stuff, man.
Yeah.
So 5 Worlds in early May 12th.
May 12th, book 4 comes out, so that puts us at 1,000 pages of story at this point. Book 4 is like it's a lot of story packed in there, and they're designed to be, books for rereading. That's what I love with my own kids is like the comics, especially the graphic novels that they treasure the most. Like they just go into kind of rereading and rereading and rereading and rereading. They'll pull them out every few weeks, some of them, and they're just back into them. So we set out to make these books that are dense enough that, we want, like on the 20th reading, we want to still have stuff that you haven't noticed yet, like that you're discovering.
Outstanding, Mark. That's great, man. Congratulations on the success of First Second and, continued success with 5 Worlds and all these amazing projects that you're behind. And truly, Really illuminating conversation, and let's make sure that this isn't the only time we talk.
Thank you for having me here. That's really cool.
No, it's my pleasure, man. And again, comics is a big world, and I do appreciate these kinds of conversations as much as I do talking to Brian Bendis and what he's doing with the Legion of Superheroes. So that's
totally, that's awesome too. That's really great. Very
Thank
cool.
you for spending time today.
Thank you, John.
Thanks again for watching another Word Balloon video. We've got plenty more at our channel, Word Balloon. If you enjoyed it, please like it and consider subscribing to the channel. And of course, support me on Patreon, patreon.com/wordballoon. Thanks a lot for watching.